have a bunch of babies, train them up in the principles of liberty, and when they get older, they will not depart from them, and all this playhouse, they will tear it down with glee.
You are listening to And If Love Remains, a unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Levitt.
Yes, my name is Mike Levitt. That was Rachel, and I am here with, I think we're going to call this series, I don't know what, Cato's Postscript, something like that. I'm here with Joe Wolverton. Welcome back, Joey.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here with you. It's my favorite podcast. Everybody knows that, though. Everybody on Facebook is like, I never heard you mention a podcast that you were on. I'm like, yeah, because I don't like most of the ones that I do.
Well, I am honored because I do love the things that we talk about, and you know, because I think we like to take this liberty thing seriously, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's like, speaking of Cato, it's like one of Cato's letters, it says, people always accuse us of not being moderate enough. So I say, you know what, let's do that. Let's give in to them and let's be moderate. And instead of inventing new ways to kill tyrants, let's just go with the old tried and true, hanging them. Let's just do that. Well, see, Cato's like, see, I can be moderate too. I'm not going to invent novel ways to kill tyrants. I just say let's go with the old fashioned dangling at the end of a rope. So there you go. I'm this liberty thing. I'm moderate. I'm not an extremist. I don't need to conceive of new and of novel ways to end all this. Let's just do it the way our fathers did. The point of a gun. Come on.
There you go. I actually, first of all, and I need to do this because I don't think I've done it in the last couple of times you've been on, but I think it's really important that people know you are an author, you are a writer, you are the author of the wonderful book, the Founder's Recipe, that goes along with a great class that people can find at amargigroup.com. You're also a writer for the New American as well as other publications. And you are a liberty warrior, a happy liberty warrior. Most of the time, happy, I think.
I'm always happy. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I'm always happy because I not only stand on the shoulders of giants, of great men whose reputation and whose erudition exceed anyone on this planet today, and standing on their shoulders is a safe and firm foundation. But I'm happy because I know we're going to win, Mike.
Yeah, that's the faith. That's the faith you got to have, right?
These days, Jesus of Nazareth is going to set his foot on the Mount of Olives, and every knee shall bow and tongue confess.
Yep. Amen. So getting back to you for a moment, I know you love spouting, you love expounding on the greatness from the past. But let's talk about you for a second. Where can people find you if they want to read some more of your works and get some more Joey Wolverton?
Yeah, I write a lot for The New American. You can just go to that website, thenewamerican.com. I write for them because they let me pretty much say what I want to say. There's very little editorial interference. And so they let me say I write a lot for the 10th Amendment Center because I consider Michael Bolden to be the Samuel Adams of our day. And it's an honor and a privilege to have anything published by the 10th Amendment Center. I write for the Abbeville Institute, which is one of these places that publish a lot of things trying to set straight the record about the so-called Civil War. The more apt name, of course, is the War for Southern Independence. But I write for them as well. And like you said, I mean, you can go to Amazon and find my books, The Founder's Recipe, a book containing a sort of, about a 25-page introduction by me, and then selections from the 37 men most often quoted by our founding generation. These are names that no one knows today. And when you read the selections from their books that the founders read, you will instantly know why these names are unknown for the most part today, because every page of that book is straight fire. It is straight pro liberty, anti tyranny fire. And this is what made our founders who they were. This is what made 50 dairy farmers wake up at 4:30 in the morning to face off against an outnumbered, a force that they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they stood there and they stood their ground. And this, you read the book, The Founder's Recipe, and you find out, why they did that. And like I always say about that book, to me, the most important aspect of it is if we read what our founders read, then there's a chance we will do what our founders did, and that is to shake off the shackles of tyranny. If, as Madison said at the convention, by force if necessary, and we will treat an American tyrant with the same ferocity that we treated a British tyrant. Um, so you can find that at Amazon, The Founder's Recipe. It's a beautiful book, man. People are like, Joey, it's expensive. It is. It's like $60, but it's a coffee table style book, man. It's
It
beautiful, and
truly is.
it's got some pages for you to take notes in. It's really beautiful. And then the other book you can find on there is What Degree of Madness. The subtitle is James Madison's Method for Making America States Again. And that book I'm very proud of. I just took basically some observations from our day, and then I took Federalist 46 as a template provided by the inimitable James Madison for if we ever find ourselves, and it's called What Degree of Madness because that's the phrase he uses in Federalist 46, saying, how crazy, mad, how crazy would you have to be to live in a country that is as tyrannical as the anti-federalists were prophesying it would become. And he says, well, let's suppose that someday Americans went crazy and allowed themselves to be ruled over by tyrants. Here is the plan to get rid of the tyrants and to make America states again. And so I thought it was a very timely instruction on how to do that. And then amargigroup.com. It's AMARGI group.com. It's where I offer classes. I offer a 4-year history curriculum for anybody who's interested, on demand videos and live Zoom classes every week. And also, and then boutique classes. I offer boutique classes on the agrarian tradition in America. I offer a
Yeah.
boutique class on the Iliad. I offer a boutique class on the writings of uh, just escaped my name, Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. The writings of de Tocqueville. I offer a boutique class, what I call the Great Traditions, which are all the classic books that were once read by Americans that have been completely thrown down the memory hole by the Ministry of Truth. I offer, let me see, is it a boutique class? There's one more that I'm spacing right now. But
Well,
anyway,
and I want to say because there may be a lot of people that are now, due to COVID and other factors, seeing what's happening in their schools. They're realizing that their kids aren't quite as safe as they thought in their schools, and they're taking responsibility for the education of their children, and which I commend, and I'm really happy about. And they might be looking for some ways to some classes that would be good for their to teach their children. I can't recommend more highly the classes that Joe teaches. They're phenomenal. They're engaging, and you will get information out of these classes that literally you will find nowhere else. And it's a testament to the great work, and I hope that people take advantage of that.
thank you, brother. Yeah, it's been it was a lot of hard work. Someone sent me a text today saying, no matter what you do in your life, Joe, you've created a home where we appreciate liberty and we can understand things the way we never had before. And I texted her back. I thought that was very kind to say, but I texted her back and said, "Well, that's mostly due to our Heavenly Father and due to Dr. Richard Vetterli and due to Algernon Sidney. Those three men deserve all the credit because I was once a good little Republican, man. I was once, shoot them all and let God sort them out and rah rah USA, and I was once that guy, that flew the flag of the empire and recited that socialist screed that we call the Pledge of Allegiance, and with a tear in my eye. I was once that guy, but I had to be put on the road by a wise professor at college who said, maybe read some of this stuff. And when, like I say, when I read Algernon Sidney, my life changed forever. It took me 5 years to read a book, and I teach that book to 14-year-olds who can read it in 5 months. But it took me, that's just to show, man, we're speeding along that path toward the return of our Savior. But yeah, that once I read Algernon Sidney and his discourses concerning government. And then I read that it was Jefferson's favorite book, and Madison and Adams and all of these people. Jefferson saying, we have got to get Sidney's discourses in the hand of every American child just as soon as he's able to understand that book. I'm telling you, when you read something like that from Jefferson, and when you read that Jefferson and Madison, when they created the University of Virginia, they put that book as one of the four that incoming freshmen had to read. You know, it changed my life, and I'm happy that it did. It was a bit sad because it does marginalize you because you're going to have far fewer friends on in the USS Liberty than you have in the USS GOP.
Yeah, that's a fact. That is a fact. Um, so we're recording this on Veterans Day of 2022. We just passed, and I guess interestingly enough, we just passed another election day. And my question for you, Joe, is: do you feel like your democracy has been secured?
I wish it were so much more insecure, Mike. I wish I could look out the window and see conflagrations at the end of every cul-de-sac in America. But sadly, no. It's just, some people didn't vote hard enough, and their guy didn't get elected. And I put a thing on Instagram, and boy, it got people riled up. And I didn't think it would. It's one of these things, man. It's like these are things I say to myself. I say these things to myself, but I thought, I should put that on Instagram. And I put up there, I said, look, for those of you who believe that the elections, as I do, that the elections have been rigged and that they are controlled or could be controlled, but yet you also get excited when your candidate quote wins the election. What does that say about your candidate? And some guy wrote me and said, "Well, you're insinuating that if my candidate wins, he's in on the election fraud." No, I'm saying that that cabal that does control the election must not find anything that objectionable about your candidate, my man. So think about that. But can I mention something, Mike? That it's I don't I I'm hesitant always to sort of blow my own horn, but I want to mention something that happened in Arkansas that I'm so proud of that
Yeah, absolutely.
nobody will talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. So, a few months ago, as a matter of fact, it was September because I was invited by some liberty-minded people in Arkansas. I'm a native of Arkansas, uh, and these people knew that from my bio. And some of these liberty-minded people invited me to Arkansas to give a series of speeches on and around Constitution Day, September 17th, regarding an issue number 3. It was a ballot measure up to amend the Constitution of the state of Arkansas. It was called the Religious Freedom Amendment, and it had the overwhelming, I'm talking about 80+% of people identifying themselves as Republican voters supported the Religious Freedom Amendment. So I went out there, and first of all, I sent several um, curated sort of documents, packets to these liberty-minded people. and I'll mention one of them in particular. I think you know her, Tawny Orton. Uh,
Yeah.
Tawny is a an immigrant to Arkansas. She's a native of Arizona, but moved to Arkansas because she got her head right, and so she lives in Stone County, Arkansas. And I want to brag on her for a minute because she's one of those ones that sponsored me going there. She put her money where her mouth is for sure, and she lives in Stone County. And prior to her efforts there, I think we would have been looking at a good solid 80% of people supporting it. But I'm happy to announce that the measure was voted down by the slimmest of margins, 7,600 votes, and it was defeated, and the Constitution will remain unamended. That had the support of 80+% of Republicans lost, and so happy about that. So grateful to God. So grateful for the good people of Arkansas who were humble enough to listen to something that was opposite, something that revealed the sort of covert effort by the government and by the Republican Party in particular in Arkansas to subvert the rights of religious freedom in that state. And so happy that by 7,600 votes, we were able to defeat that. And
Wow.
in Stone County, where Tawny lives, it was voted down by the narrowest of margins, but so proud of her. And, it was one of those things, Mike.
Wow.
I don't really think much about the impact of things because I don't see that I have any influence, and I don't want to argue about it. I just don't think I do. But when on Tuesday night, I'm not hey, let's watch the vote because I vote harder, Daddy. I don't.
Right, right.
I'm not that guy. You're not gonna. You never voted yourself out of tyranny. No one ever has, and I don't belong to either party or any of the parties. But I watched that issue, and I swear I must have refreshed that page a million times. And at the end of the day, it was defeated by 7,600 votes. And it literally brought tears to my eyes because I was like, these people, were just humble enough to understand the issue, what was behind the issue, the covert attempts by the corporate GOP to deny them their liberty, and boy, and they today enjoy a greater freedom than they would have had they just simply gone in there and pushed the button according to what the Republican leaders told them to do. And just a really great day. And I don't, like I said, I don't pay much attention to the influence, and I'm not saying I influenced the vote. I'm just happy that we won.
Well,
Won.
it's one, it's one step of, of light in a kind of, dark empired world. So that is good. And I wanted to say, like, and I'm not saying this because this, so I'm not saying anything you don't know. And I'm not trying to say this to rain on a parade or anything, but it is also just heartbreaking to think like you're also 7,000 votes away from having liberty, from another piece of liberty being taken away, and in such an insidious way. um I just I always think about that, like, yeah, your guy won by how many votes? Well, that means that you're that, or that idea won by so many votes. Well, that means you're only X number of votes away from, your rights being thwarted by your neighbors, and that is just, oh, I just get irked by that sort of thing. So not, congratulations, but man, that's always the other side of the coin in my mind.
No, and that's the right way to. And I encourage people to look at things that way because it's going to come up again, Mike.
Right.
These people are not content. They have decided, despicably and immorally, they have decided to adopt the ways of that cabal, that conspiracy, whose aim it has been since our first parents were banished from the Garden of Eden. The aim of this conspiracy and this cabal has been to destroy liberty in this country and in every country. And so they will not sit by and simply say, "Oh, we lost this one. That stinks. Oh well." No. Next year it'll be on the ballot again next year, and we'll have to keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting. And that's the sad thing to say, that had they had, because you look, they don't need 7,000 to win. They just needed, 3,000, whatever, and had a tie, and then it would have gone to another referendum, and
Right.
that kind of thing. And so, yeah, you're right. It's an uphill battle, and it is, these people, Mike, they need to be called out. They're the GOP Incorporated, the Democrats Incorporated, Libertarianism Incorporated. They all need to be called out for the fact that
Yeah.
they're doing nothing but learning the ways of the cabal and partaking of the spoils. When they learn their ways and they start doing things the way that the evil has done since the beginning of mankind, you can call yourself what, I don't care what letter you put after your name. If what you are saying denies in any way the individual liberty that was vouchsafed on Calvary and in Gethsemane, then you and I ain't friends. And I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a libertarian. I don't care what you are. If you in any way infringe upon the agency of the individual to choose for himself that which he believes to be best, then you and I aren't friends, because I value liberty, and I value it. Perhaps the most salient reason for the worth of liberty in my mind is the blood shed by Jesus. And if Jesus, who is my Savior and the Son of God, if he believed that individual agency, if he and his Father believed that individual agency was worth him bleeding from every pore, was worth him being nailed to a cross, then I'm going to go ahead and side with them and against everybody else.
That's the preacher of liberty there, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Wolverton. Yes. It's the gospel, it's impossible to, in my mind, to separate um, the gospel as a liberty from sin and death, which it is, from also a gospel that liberates, that is supposed to liberate us from the tyranny of man.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like, I was on a, talking about podcasts that I don't sort of promote, but I was on a podcast the other day. I won't say who it is, because half of that team is interested in liberty. But I was on their podcast and kept trying to force me to play the game according to the rules set by the enemies of liberty. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to argue what you're wanting me to argue. I'm stepping back and saying, here are the principles. If you want to heed the principles, if you want to live in a society where these principles are valued, where these principles are promoted, where freedom is facilitated, we can have a discussion all day. But I'm not going to sit here and play the game of, okay, well, aren't you really happy that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade? Don't care.
Yeah.
Literally could not possibly care less about that. Well, I know what you mean, Joe, but we live in the real world. Right, but that has nothing to do with, because I told him, what's going to happen in 4 years or whatever. There's, you know, and the court has switched from being, quote, conservative, unquote, to being progressive. And they say that abortion on demand is the right of every American, no matter, without restriction. What are you going to say? Oh, dang it. We got to switch it back the other way. Or are you going to get out a gallows with 9 ropes and let's get it done?
Right.
And you know what you're going to, and I told him, you know what you're going to do. You're going to vote harder. You're going to pray that God send a Republican to put good people on the Supreme Court. Yeah, I don't pray that. I pray God sends his son back and burns up the wicked.
Yeah.
So
That's
you and me ain't the same. And I'm going to discuss what the Constitution is, not what it has been perverted into.
okay. So, and by the way, it's interesting because you understand this. I want to talk a little bit just because you brought it up. I think it's a good subject to delve into for a second, and that is the Supreme Court, because we do have this Dobbs decision. I think it is interesting from a standpoint of, I think it has revealed how pro-death so many people are in America. But aside from that, um, the fact that the Supreme Court was ever meant to make decisions like it does and have it be, quote, the law of the land, like that is such a it is, there's nowhere in the Constitution where it says that. So can you talk a little bit about the role of the Supreme Court and what it was supposed to be intended for versus what it is now?
Yeah, well, the starting point, of course, is Article 6, which lists those things which are the supreme law of the land. If you agree, if you as a state, if you ratified the Constitution that was proposed out of Philadelphia in 1787, if you ratified, then there were certain uh, requirements, and one of them was the supreme law of the land is those things which are listed in Article 8, which are basically laws passed by Congress, the Constitution itself, and any treaties that are lawfully entered into. And there's an ancient Latin maxim of the law, Mike, that says if there is, I'm going to say it in English to make it easy, if there's a list made and something is left off the list, then it has been left off the list purposefully. If there is no list, if it simply said, obey the supreme law of the land, then we can argue about what the drafters meant. But if the drafters provide a list, these are the things that are supreme law of the land, and something's not on the list, then you must presume that they purposefully left that thing off the list. Well, what do you not find on that list? Supreme Court opinions. Now, so after you read Article 6, you go to Article 1. The very first line of the Constitution says all, the word all, legislative power herein granted shall be vested in the Congress. So there are no laws that are not passed by Congress. Nothing some 80-year-old in a fancy black robe says is law, any more than what some 53-year-old in a sweater vest says is law. Okay.
Right.
I do not make law. The Supreme Court does not make law. And for the same reason, the first line of the Constitution says all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress. Okay, so that's the next step. Then you go to Article 3 and you read the powers of the Supreme Court, and nowhere is it listed that they are to have the authority to be the ultimate, final arbiter of what is and what is not the law. Now, what is their constitutional role? If you go, and I know people won't read the Federalist Papers, read the notes of the convention kept by Madison, you will see that and read the debates of the ratification in the various states. Mind you, Mike, all these things I mentioned can be found for free on the internet, right? You don't have to go
That's
buy
right.
a book. You can
You don't
Google.
even have to go to the library.
Do not have to go to the library. You can sit in your drawers, in your bed, and read these to your heart's content. So the Federalist Papers, the ratification debates in the states, and the convention in Philadelphia in 1787 all make it very clear the Supreme Court's role was to be a co-equal branch with the other two and to be a way to advise the other two branches if anything they'd done potentially violates the Constitution. But even there, they're not the ultimate arbiter because, as Jefferson said, they have no more power than the other branches. So if the president does something, I don't know, like issues an edict saying, bibbity bobbity, your student loans are forgiven,
That
then
would never happen.
that would, what degree of madness, right? So
Right.
the Supreme Court could say, "Oi, Joe, pedo Joe." They'd have to send like some child over for him to actually pay attention, right? But
Right.
they could send a message saying, you don't really have that power in the Constitution, and then he can violate that, and then it becomes what's so simple, man. If people just crack a book, then it becomes if he carries on with his unconstitutional policy, then it becomes the role of the states, as explained by Madison in Federalist 39, 45, 46, and by Hamilton in 78. It becomes the role of the states to say, yeah, we're not doing that because that's not in the contract we signed.
Right.
Simple as that. Simple as that. They don't have to pass a bill. They don't have to do anything but say, no, you don't have that power. So you see, the Supreme Court doesn't get to be the ultimate arbiter. The states are meant to be the ultimate decider, the ultimate referee, the ultimate court of no appeal are the state governments who say that is in the Constitution, that is not in the
And,
Constitution.
and again, this all comes. We have to make the assumption that it's even under the purview of the federal government when so much is like, for example, I mean, Roe versus Wade, the abortion. How does that fall under the purview of the federal government? How does um, asset forfeiture fall under the purview of the federal government? Um, how does all these these powers and things that have been granted to the federal government, they're all null and void just by the nature of what they are.
Dude, it's so simple. Okay, please, people, and dude, you could buy, you know how much I'm gonna be, this is time for transparency with Uncle Joey. Do you know how much money I get for every copy of What Degree of Madness is sold through Amazon? I get $2. So don't get it in your mind that I'm going to be getting rich from this recommendation. But I have a big chunk of What Degree of Madness is devoted to explaining this concept of the Constitution as a contract and as the role of principal and agent. The principals, that is to say, the states, came together to create an agent to do things for them that allowed them freedom to devote time and energy to other things, just as if a human being just as if a human being hired a personal assistant, an agent, right? Like when I used to be a full time traveling around speaker, I had an agent, and that agent would, instead of me having to book all my speaking engagements, he handled it all. And we had a contract. And in that contract was laid out within the four corners of that contract the entirety, the complete universe of authority possessed by that agent vis-a-vis my speaking and traveling. And so, for example, I had in there, I only stay at Marriott hotels. If he booked me into a Super 8, there would be no requirement that I show up at that reservation, and I would not pay for it because it violated the contract. In the contract, it said, here's a list of the things about which I will agree to speak. Well, anything not on that list, if he signed me to speak about dinosaurs, which I know nothing about, I would not go make that speech. It did not give him authority to buy a car in my name. If he went and bought a car in my name and then said, here you go, Joey, I thought you'd really like this car. Payments are $700 a month. I'm not paying for it because he didn't have that authority. Well, that exact same relationship was intended by the Constitution of 1787 between the states as the principals, as the employer, and the federal government as the agent, that is to say, the employee. And just as employees cannot determine the boundaries of their own job description, the federal government likewise cannot determine by itself the boundaries of its granted authority. It is so dang simple. I gave a whole speech, a whole series of speeches sponsored by the 10th Amendment Center, where what I said was, if it ain't in there, they can't do it.
Right.
And it's just that it's no, and look, I know that, there are books to be read that are much more important than the Constitution. I get it, because there are people out there that possibly name, oh, I don't know, any of the Supreme Court justices, but they could name the entirety of the genealogy of Harry Potter.
Right.
Right. Do your thing, man. I'm again individual agency. That way, when you get judged, it's all on you, and you can't say, "But Joey." Nope, Joey was preaching that individual agency from Jump Street. So, if you don't care about the Constitution, go on, do your thing. But all I'm saying is, if you're one of these people who purport and proclaim and crow about your fidelity to the Constitution, then you ought to know that document. And I'm looking at you, members of a particular religion who have a commandment from your God to befriend the Constitution, and then yet you go and vote for warmongers year after year after year. You vote for soft socialists who increase the size of government year after year after year. And yet you get in church and I love this country and the Constitution and our founding fathers. No, you don't. You wouldn't know James Madison if he came in and slapped you in your ugly face.
Well, and James Madison would say, "I know thee not."
Yeah, and you know what? That wow, Mike, that's a good point. James, depart from me. You know, with your lips you draw nigh unto the Constitution, but your heart and your voting record is far from it.
Right. And let me also say, because I love what you just said about the limiting factor of the contract agreement between the states and the federal government. But there's also another limiting factor, and that is that the federal government, not only can the federal government, or any government for that matter, only do that as it is contracted to do, but it also cannot do anything that another state couldn't be authorized to do. In other words, another state can go and invade Mexico, and be authorized to do that. And so, therefore, what gives the federal government the power to invade another country?
Right. It's a maxim of the law that's been around since, the time of the Greek confederacies, circa, 600 BC, that I cannot grant to someone authority I do not myself possess. And so the states are the creators, the federal government's the creation. There is no rational argument to the contrary. I don't care what freaking Daniel Webster said. There is no rational, there's no rational explanation. I mean, unless you believe, which is again irrational, that the federal government was created ex nihilo, some sort of divine finger, but
Right.
the states as the creators and as the, drafters of the contract, they can't give to their employee, to their agent, the federal government, power they don't have. I couldn't say in my agent contract with John, who is my agent, I couldn't put in there, and you have the power to have my neighbor's children go to bed at 8 o'clock
Right.
because I don't have that power. So I can't give someone power I don't have. So you're exactly right. Just as the states don't have authority to do certain things, if the federal government does something that the states themselves don't have authority to do, then the federal government doesn't have that power because it is the employee. You're not going to tell me that the employee has authority above the CEO.
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense. The thought makes reason stare, as a great poetess once wrote. You're just
Well,
like, what?
and and that principle goes all the way up and down. Meaning, first of all, on the federal level, for example, the idea of state secrets just makes me laugh. Like, wait a sec, I'm the employer of the federal government. The state is the employer. There's no such thing as a federal secret or top secret. Like, there's
Right.
no such thing. You can't,
Yeah.
like, if I worked for a company and I was holding secrets from my boss, I'd be fired immediately.
If your boss said, "Hey, can you show me that report that you did on whatever?" No, it's protected. What do you mean protected?
Right.
Yeah, I can't show it to you. It's secret.
Right.
You know what isn't secret? I'm fixing to get on this PA system and announce to everyone what a doofus you are and that you're fired.
In fact, I've been spying on your in your bedroom every night, and I'm gonna let everybody know. And I've
Right.
got blackmail on you now.
Well, and that's true. But I wanted to read this thing because it's something that you know, and yes, I stand on the shoulders of men so much greater than I. But there is this. Speaking of this federal government and its consolidation, and I'll tell people, oh my gosh, the Constitution class I teach that you mentioned earlier, you know, it's stuff they don't teach in school, man. But it's stuff like I teach what are the big issues that were debated at the convention, right? Well, one of them is consolidation versus confederation, because some of the anti-federalists were like, there's some stuff in this Constitution that seems to grant too much authority to the central government, and so I wanted to read this from Patrick Henry. Oh my gosh, Patrick Henry standing up for hours on end debating the great. Can you imagine debating James Madison? Which if anybody ever asked, where would you go back in time? Like, I want to go back and sit there and watch James Madison and Patrick Henry go toe to toe for hours
Right.
without,
James v. Patrick, right? Let's go.
without notes, just standing there go and being so polite. You can disagree without being disagreeable. No atom of ill will, as Madison once said. So in this speech, Henry summoned the specter of consolidating tendencies, which was haunting the proposed federal government.
Ooh, that's so
And
good.
so he summoned his, as he called them, poor abilities to defend and ensure the sovereignty and the survival of the state government, particularly his government, the Old Dominion, the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so this is what he looked into the future, and then he forced all of his colleagues sitting there to look with him into this crystal ball and look at the grim scenario. And this is what Patrick Henry said: if consolidation proves to be as mischievous to this country as it has been to other countries, what will the poor inhabitants of this country do? This government will operate to ambush all of us. It will destroy the state governments and swallow the liberties of the people, all without giving any advance notice. Wow.
Profit, man.
Preach it, brother Patrick.
Yep.
And he goes on for 4 hours, Mike, without notes, and just flays this Constitution and its consolidating tendencies. Now, Madison has his answer in Federalist 46, right? But what I'm getting at is we have disappointed our fathers. We have allowed luxury and avarice and immorality to dominate our society, and we have sown those things, and we are now reaping the results. And the result is this government with a consolidating tendency that has swallowed up the liberties of the people and never gave us advance notice. And this is what we live with now. And the question becomes, what do we do? There is no tyranny without obedience to a tyrant, because tyrants are going to tyrant. So the question is, what do we do about it? Do we do what our fathers did and get fed up? Or do we simply sit back and enjoy our time on the plantation? And simply, when we occasionally get a lash for driving our private vehicle too speedily along Master's Highway, right? We'll
Right?
occasionally get a lash, but we'll go home and we'll lick our wound and say, you know what? I deserved it. I broke the law, and we'll stay. And I'm really comfortable here, and we will stay here. And it just becomes that. It becomes a question. It's like the what will be the spark that sets off the powder keg, right? What
Well,
will
and
be
that's
the spark?
and see that's the question. In some ways, the I mean, I think in every way, and you've this is what you've been talking about just now. The federal government is a symptom of the problem. The problem isn't the federal government. The federal government is what it is. It's a tyrannical force that is a leviathan that is tentacles are just doing what tentacles do. It does what a virus does. The
Right.
problem is our hearts aren't right.
It's that story about carrying the snake across the river,
Right.
And the snake's like, I promise I won't bite you, man. And then and the snake bites you, and you're like, hey, you promised me you wouldn't bite me. I'm a snake, man. You knew what I was when you picked me up. And so we have the snake. It takes our liberty. It takes our First Amendment, our Second Amendment, our Fourth Amendment, our Fifth Amendment, our Sixth Amendment, all these rights protected by the amendments, and they completely obliterate them. They completely legislatively repeal all of the protections of our rights in the Bill of Rights, and we don't care. And the problem is not that the federal government is tyrannical. The problem is we don't do anything to tyrants.
Right.
This is the problem, y'all. The problem isn't that, the federal government is tyrannical. Well, no, Sherlock, that's what tyrants do, right? The problem is that we don't care. Can I read this to you? This is I taught a class a couple of years ago on this book, a discourse on voluntary servitude by Etienne de la Boissière, written in 1576, Mike. Okay. 200 years before the Declaration of Independence. Okay.
Okay.
Listen to what Brother de la Boissière has to say. It amazes us to hear accounts of the valor that liberty arouses in the hearts of those who defend it. But who could believe reports of what goes on every day among the inhabitants of some countries? Who could really believe that one man alone may mistreat 100,000 and deprive them of our liberty? Who would credit such a report if he merely heard it without being present to witness the event? And if this condition occurred only in distant lands and were only reported to us, which one among us would not assume that the tale was imagined or invented and certainly not true? Obviously, there is no need of fighting to overcome this single tyrant, for he is automatically defeated if the country refuses to consent to its own enslavement. It is not necessary to deprive him of anything, but simply to give him nothing. There is no need that the country make an effort to do anything for itself, provided it does nothing against itself. It is therefore the inhabitants themselves who permit, or rather bring about, their own subjection, since by ceasing to submit, they could put an end to their servitude. Amen and amen, worlds
Oh
of
man,
praise.
that
200
is,
years before the Declaration, my brother.
and I want to submit this to my generous listeners who've been listening. Maybe you're inspired by some of the things that you're hearing, and you're wondering, well, what do I do? Like I've been taught all my life that I should obey the law. Maybe I've been taught this, I've been taught that, and I would recommend try to find a small way to be disobedient. Find a small way to to follow an unjust to not follow excuse me not follow an unjust law, whatever that might look like, and start there. Start with baby steps, man, because I think this country will be saved, if it is to be saved, by the disobedient.
That has always been the case since recorded history of time. May I remind you, good Christians and Jews and Muslims, in fact, Moses' mother refused to obey. Putting that baby in a little basket and covering it with pitch and putting it in the river was that little act of disobedience that set the enslaved Hebrews free. Moses' mother would not obey.
And then fast forward a few thousand years, and it was Mary and Joseph that didn't obey and left, that saved Jesus for the same reason.
There you go. And just there's, like you say, little acts. But I will say this, this is the thing that I push and I believe in more than anything. First of all, it becomes every man who has been warned to warn his neighbor. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is, hey, you can warn your neighbor if you want to, but guess what? You can create a captive audience. Christians, anybody who loves liberty, get married, have a bunch of babies, and train them to be disobedient terrorists. Train them to be domestic terrorists, the way James and Nellie Madison trained their child, right? All of these are founding fathers. Go out. You want to be a rebel? You want to do the ultimate act of disobedience and sticking it to the tyrant? Get married, have a bunch of babies, train them up in the principles of liberty, and when they get older, they will not depart from them. And all this playhouse, they will tear it down with glee.
And nothing can stop that.
It's like Sydney said, baby, those children, like Coriolanus and Brutus, those children were raised by mothers to know what it meant to be a free Roman. And guess what? They were raised, as Sydney describes them, hid and unregarded by the king of Rome. Those kids
Right.
were taught in their homes outside. You can't send your kids to the indoctrination camp, man. Maybe that's your first step. If you've already had your babies and you're dropping your babies off at these indoctrination camps, don't drop them off tomorrow. Do whatever it takes. Make the sacrifice for your family, man. I don't care if you have to downsize. Do what it takes to bring your kids home. Teach them principles that are timeless and true, and then just set them free when they get a little older and watch what they do.
And can I say this because uh, I know how a lot of people who are even considering a homeschool lifestyle. I know some of the thoughts they have, and one thing I have to say is you have to worry less about what they learn and worry more about how they learn and that they learn principles, because any kind of information, math, I mean, even as far as math, science, anything that they want to learn is for free on the internet. They can find it all right now. They don't need a teacher to, they can find it, and they will when they're inspired to do so. But what they won't find is they're not going to find the principles that are going to guide their life and guide their actions and guide the things that are going to safeguard our liberty and their children's and their grandchildren's liberty.
Yeah, you're not going to send them to tyrant controlled indoctrination camps and expect them to acquire the information required to tear down the tyrant.
Right.
No
You know,
tyrant is ever going to do that, Mike. There, no one
yeah,
would do that. You have got, and I don't care, man. Like I don't. Oh, I hear people all the time. I can't homeschool because this. You know what my grandma used to say? My
what's
grandma,
that?
the greatest saint I've ever known. She used to say whenever I'd say I can't do that, Grandma, she'd say your can't gets in front of your won't to. Right. Now that's Southern pronunciation for your can't gets in front of your want to. In
That's
other
so
words,
good.
yeah, you just say you can't, but the real reason is you don't want to do it, man.
Yeah.
You can do it. You can get rid of Disney Plus. You can get rid of Hulu. You can get rid of Peacock. You can get rid of Netflix. You can get rid of Amazon Prime. And you can do that in the name of raising righteous, rigorously taught patriots in your own home. And I'm going to tell you, man, there's going to come a day, like I said, when you're going to sit there and you're going to, if you have made the sacrifices that it took to raise up this generation of Sons of Liberty 2.0, if you made those sacrifices, I'm going to guarantee you right now that our God will make up the difference in manifold ways that you sitting there today cannot even comprehend, because great is our God, and he will reward those who show that they sacrifice in the name of those things that he holds dear. And there is nothing he holds more dear than the individual agency to choose right or wrong.
And that's a fact, man. That's a fact. And and I think there's also people that are listening that are under the idea that the United States is a special country, and I think about this so much. I think about, like, we read Shakespeare, we read any kind of history, and we see the things that kings will kill their children to maintain their power. People who want power will do anything. They will manipulate, they will conquer, they will destroy lives, they will anything they can to get that power. And to think like that wouldn't happen here, that doesn't happen here in every state, in every election, and every time, like, you don't think people wouldn't die to have the power that Joe Biden has, or kill to have that power? You don't think people wouldn't absolutely? I mean, what's the consequence of skewing an election? Like, there is no consequence, especially now. There's no consequence, and so
Prove
to think,
prove I did it.
right? Well, not just prove I did it, prove that I did it, and then do something about it. Like,
Make anyone care that I did it.
right? And so here we are in the greatest, the most powerful empire that the world has ever seen, and you don't think, like, Roman emperors when slit the throat of their own mother to have this kind of power? So, and I
Mike,
say that
Caligula would blush at the power possessed by an average congressman today.
that's right. That's right. And so we are not special in the sense that we have not destroyed human nature because of all that consolidated power. Thank you, Patrick Henry. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that concept in this podcast. Because of the consolidated power that the federal government has, there is nothing somebody wouldn't do to just get a piece of that power. And that is a major problem. And it's going to take, as you said before, and this is why I bring it up, like, people need to understand what the state of what kind of state that we're in, so they can understand why we need to have children and why we're in the wilderness right now and how to get out of it.
Heaven knows how to place value on its goods, and freedom is such a celestial object. And if you think you can restore liberty to this people without significant personal sacrifice, then you are a traitor, should be branded as such, and accept what is coming down the pike. Because I'm telling you, there is a generation of these hid and unregarded children that, as Sydney says, when they rise up to the age that they can make manifest, they will make greater witnesses of liberty than the world has ever seen. And guess what? You're either with us or you're against us. And guess who's at the front of that army? Guess who's at the front of that army? He who has been at the front of the army since before recorded time, none other than Jesus Christ and him crucified. And he comes, and he is no longer a babe in Bethlehem, but he is the Lord of the hosts of heaven, and he will come, and terrific and mighty will be the vengeance that he brings to those who victimized his father's children. You can guarantee that. And so I would recommend to everyone to remember that that day is coming. Study these things. Find like-minded people. Unite with them. Go off into the wilderness with them, as God told Abraham, right? Lech lecha, get up, get going. Our father, there are the world's three major religions look to Abraham as a father. Well, as God told our father Abraham, Lech lecha, get up, get going, you do the same bloody thing. Get up, get going. If you got to go to the wilderness, do it. Take people with you that believe like you do, and then stand there, raise up that generation of Sons of Liberty 2.0, draw the line, and those kids, when they get old enough, they will stand on one side of that line, and they will stare down those tyrants and say, don't you dare take a step over that line. And I promise you that they will exact vengeance as the world has never known, and they will do so with the sword of Jesus in their hands.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
The first of 23 installments requested by Dr. Levitt. We're trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization